Hey there. Back for this be lecture number 2. Gonna try to get whatever's left of the PowerPoint that I haven't finished all of it. But anyway, there I'm in my wife's office. I've taken over her office. You can see a wonderful picture of me up there, and all of the wonderful pink stuff that my wife loves. Anyway, let's get started. We were talking about William Shakespeare and the Elizabethan world. So let me get to that. Here we are. All right, so let's get, we talked about all of this, right? All that good stuff. Elizabethan England. We were discussing the religious aspect of it and how highly religious the society was, as well as the superstitions, ghosts, witches, all of that stuff. And then finally, we were talking about the overwhelming poverty. A lot of that came from, besides the fact that, the people at the top, as they are still today, are very greedy. But at the time of Shakespeare in the Elizabethan England, there was the Black Plague that basically ended up wiping out like 1/3 of all of the people in Europe. And whenever the plague would pop up, it was highly contagious. It was incredibly deadly. And whenever it would pop up, they would shut down businesses, and something that we're very, aware of right now and how that works. You got to shut businesses down. You try to keep people home. You definitely want to try to keep places closed that where people would gather. So for one would be like the theaters, and that's Shakespeare's, and all of his actors. That hit them in the pocketbook. But at the same time that this was happening, there was also a problem with the crops. These folks just kept getting hit over and over and over again with catastrophe after catastrophe, and there were no social programs like there are today. Um, those of you that are experiencing the worst of this with families that have lost jobs, there's a stimulus package that the government sent out. There were, there's food banks, there are places, there's unemployment, there's things to try to help keep people, allow people to keep their heads above water. But those didn't exist, and folks, then if they didn't make their they didn't pay their mortgage, they didn't pay their rent, they're out on the streets, they starved to death. And just unless there was somebody that was kind enough to help them out, that was the end of them. So the idea that death was pretty much just waiting outside the door for a lot of these folks. All right, so let's talk about dueling. All right, so you can see this. This is not necessarily a picture from the Elizabethan world, but I thought the costumes were kind of cool, and you can see the swords, and that's very much close to what the swords would have looked like in Shakespeare's day, the people dueling. I believe I spelled dueling wrong. I believe it only has one L, but hey, whatever. So let's talk about dueling. So there, see, that's the right spelling. This is what a duel, if you're not sure what a duel is, it's an arranged engagement in combat. So, and the idea of a duel is, yes, they both agreed. It's not one guy. If somebody does come after you and you're defending yourself, it's kind of considered a little different than a duel. A duel generally was, you agree, both sides agree to this. With matched weapons, again, it's not fair. One guy's got a knife, one guy's got a sword. So the idea that, and then later on in history, it became good guns and so on. During the 17th, 18th century, duels were mostly fought with swords, the rapier, and later a small sword. Now, this is what you would consider, this is a rapier. So this is what we'll see in Romeo and Juliet. Dueling was a practice through which claims, so the masculine honor, the idea of dueling has to deal with honor, and Romeo and Juliet is huge. The play is so hugely wrapped around the idea of honor. If you were to say, to get one word, a subject of what this play was about, it's about honor, and in lots of different ways. And the idea of dueling, I spelled it wrong again. The idea that with young men, or even grown men, dueling was a way for them to make claim to their honor if their honor was insulted. If they feel that they need to try to make, to try to prove their masculinity in front of others, they would challenge somebody to a duel. This is really no different than when you got young guys at school fighting. What are they fighting about? They're fighting generally about honor. Somebody said something about them. Was last year we had something happen where some kid sneezed on another kid's taco and ended up having to, somebody got arrested and somebody else went to the hospital. Um, a comment made, somebody stepping on somebody's shoes, somebody staring at somebody the wrong way. We all know that these things will set off fights. And, the idea of, back in the day with, during this time is that these folks, it's not that there weren't fist fights, there absolutely were. But there were, but they also had swords. And because duels were something that were quite prevalent, then if you are a family of money, knowing that this is something that your son could encounter, then you made sure that, starting from an early age, that you tried to pay for the best training that they can get. So, if this was the case where, let's be honest, if today's world, you go to school and you knew that every day there's a possibility somebody was going to challenge you to a fight to the death, you probably would have been trained to fight most of your life. So this idea of masculine honor amongst young men and well, men of any age, fighting either to claim to claim honor, to build your credibility, your street cred, I guess you'd say, or because you've been insulted, even slighted, and you are trying to regain honor back. Incredibly important in the Elizabethan era, honor. And again, even today, again, like I said, just in the school, but if you look at a lot of communities, a lot of societies around the world, the idea of honor and honor of one's family, honor of oneself, absolutely, in certain societies, is the most important thing. A duel, again, it could be a face-to-face challenge. So you can go up to somebody in the streets, you've seen in the film, you slap somebody across the face, or the goofy thing where somebody takes off a glove and slaps somebody in the face with their glove. Or they do it through some sort of a, you do it through a formal imitation. Hold on one second.
I've never been challenged to a duel before.
Okay, fine. Good. A duel. The winner gets Angela.
I challenge James Delaney to a duel.
I challenge you to a duel.
I challenge you to this duel.
I challenge you to a duel.
I challenge you to a duel.
To the death?
Yes.
I am challenging you, sir, to a duel.
I accept.
Are you serious?
I challenge you to a duel for control of the beach.
Fine, let's have a duel.
I challenge you to a duel.
Oh, no.
And I challenge you to a duel. On guard.
I challenge you to a duel. A handball duel.
I challenge you to a duel. Oh, what's the point?
I challenge you to a duel.
I challenge you to a duel, sir.
I challenge you to a duel.
Cool. Whatever.
Are you challenging me to a duel?
A duel, then.
A duel.
All right, so yeah, there's that. So again, the idea of a duel being a face-to-face challenge, and again, the movies definitely show more face-to-face, but again, it could be done through a formal invitation. You would send a letter to somebody's house and say, hey, I guess today would be considered doing it through Snapchat or something. You're going to send out and you're going to challenge somebody to a fight. And then that person being challenged, there's a few things they can do. And it just depends on, the situation. They can either accept the challenge, and there can be they're going to do what they're going to do, fight, sword fight, fist fight, whatever. There can be a payment. So if, especially if it's something to the death, I'm not going to fight over this to the death. So how about I give you $50 and you just, we'll call it good. And then that would settle it, because the idea is that there's a loss of honor. If the person backs down and there's a loss of honor, and that's a choice that somebody can make. And you can even see that, unfortunately, in a lot of, when you look again at school fights, and somebody's going to challenge somebody to a fight, and somebody backs down in front of everybody, and everybody thinks that that person's a coward, or there's a lot of people look down on them, and there's again the idea of a loss of honor, and like I said, there are different ways that it can be dealt with. All of it going back to, I'm going to challenge you because you've insulted my honor, or I'm going to challenge you because I'm trying to gain honor. You're going to accept because you need to defend your honor, or it's a way for you to show that you're an honorable person. It Again, this stuff is a life or death situation, so it wasn't a joke. So let's talk about going from dueling, and we'll talk more in there to the play. But let's talk about rules of courting. Courting meaning that you're going to ask a girl, a male is going to, a boy or a man is going to ask for a girl's hand in marriage. So let's talk about courting in Elizabethan England. First, there are rules that you had to follow. It wasn't something where, girls were not generally allowed to leave the house. They get to go to church. Girls, the idea of them, today, girls going to school, that was not something that happened. Girls did not go to school. They were not allowed to just wander around town by themselves, or even with a group of friends. There would need to be chaperones. There needed to be adults with them to make sure that they were being watched at all times, because, any sort of rumors about girls, talking to boys, that could all result in some really bad stuff. We'll get more into that. But anyway, let's talk about the rules of courting. So generally, it's going to happen, the man, or, usually it's a man. In the case of Shakespeare being married at 18 years old, that was incredibly rare. Usually it's a man in his early 20s or mid 20s, or even later. It's a guy, once he's got himself set up to the point where he can support a family, then he's going to go to this woman, or, I could take that and change that to girl, because, the age of consent at that age, at that time, the idea of, of law being to get married is 12 years old. So a girl at 12, and we'll see this in Romeo and Juliet, girls at 12, 13, 14 years old. The idea, and it's, again, uncomfortable to talk about, the idea that a girl who is able to give birth, once she has, reached the point in her life where she, is fertile, and is able to give birth to a child, then at that point she's of marrying age, and she's it's awful to say, but she's at that point, she's fair game, depending on how the father wants to deal with the situation. So the man would go to the father and ask for permission to talk to the daughter. This would imply, says, that the man is serious. It's not it's not a joke where you're like, I'm going to date for a little while, just want to talk with this girl because I like her, but I don't plan on marrying her. I would hope that, those of you that have relationships now, that you're not like, oh my God, I'm dating this person, and someday we're going to get married, which, that's crazy. You're kids. So this idea of, you're a man, and that means that you're serious. Now, it doesn't mean that you 100% have to marry this girl, but it does mean that you're serious about the discussion of marriage. In saying yes to a court, the father is granting the man permission. So now there's going to be a visit. And again, it's going to be under strict supervision. We'll see this, a lot of this in Romeo and Juliet. There's going to be adults watching. They're going to be in the room. They're going to be listening to the conversation that's going on, because if any sort of, shenanigans are even rumored that something happened where a girl is alone with a guy, then that could destroy the honor of the entire family. And it can't happen, not in this time, not in that time period. And again, we'll see this here in a bit. We'll see this still going on in other parts of the world. So it's under strict supervision. The reason for the courtship is to make sure it's not for the girl. The girl's feelings were unimportant. If she didn't like the guy, it doesn't matter. And that's not the way that it didn't matter. It was between the father and the man who was courting the girl. If the father wanted to listen to what the daughter had to say, well, it just mattered the relationship in the family. But the courting situation was mostly for the man to make sure that this is a girl that he wanted to marry. This is somebody that he wanted to become the mother of his children. This is the woman that he wanted to to be spending the rest of his life with. Again, whether she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him or not, it did not matter. And most of these marriages were arranged. They were arranged about keeping wealth. My daughter, I'm a rich person and I have a daughter, and I'm going to marry my rich daughter to a rich family. or a powerful family. If there's a way that I can marry my daughter, you're talking about social class. If I can move my entire family up by marrying my daughter to somebody who's rich, then that's, something that would happen. If Bill Gates had a son and I got a daughter, a teenage daughter, and he's kind of a creep, and she's not real hip about it, but I can force an arranged marriage, and then I get to be part of Bill Gates's family and be part of those billions and billions of dollars. Well, there's fathers that would absolutely make that decision, whether their daughter's unhappy or not. So the idea of reputation is taken into consideration. You marry your daughter off to a noble family. And the same with the men. They're going to marry women of social classes that are going to, help them maintain their image in society. They're going to want to marry women whose fathers, families are rich as well. So then that, it absolutely, most of the marriages were arranged without, the girl's consent. And it's awful. Still places in the world where this is happening. I've had a couple of students in my past that I had that left the country after graduation because they had an arranged marriage. I had a girl, several years ago that, she just graduated, and then just a week after she graduated, she was on a plane heading to another country because there had been an arranged marriage that had been set up when she was a child, and she knew it. It's heartbreaking. She didn't want to get married. She didn't. She couldn't. She had no choice. So anyway, this is the idea of courting in Elizabethan. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it, for the young ladies? All right, and let's get to. You can't even see that down at the bottom. It says a refusal of a marriage arrangement by a girl would result in a loss of honor. And I can't even read the bottom of that. What does that say? Hold on one second. Let me see if I can't pull that up. Wow. Hey, it's just me on the screen now. Let me see if I can't figure out what that thing said there, because I want to make sure I got the whole thing. It says a refusal of a marriage arrangement by a girl would result in a loss of honor, which would and a loss of honor, which would lead to an honor beating or an honor killing. Now, when we're talking about an honor beating or an honor killing, this was an unfortunate thing about this society as well, is that if a girl, because some of the ladies right now that are watching this are like, I just wouldn't do it. Well, that didn't work out so well for those young ladies, because they would be beaten, because you're talking about a loss of honor. A girl who refuses, it absolutely is a huge loss of honor. A refusal of a father's choice. So it would arrange, yes, the father, in order to gain the honor back of the family, in order to gain honor back in this, you take it, the girl would be taken outside and in public and beaten. There's a phrase, I don't know if you've heard this phrase, called rule of thumb. Rule of thumb is an old phrase that comes from, and this goes with wives as well, that men could beat their wives or their daughters in public, but the stick that they beat their wives or daughter with could not be bigger around than their thumb. So that's rule of thumb. So you can't beat your daughter or your wife with a stick that's bigger around than your thumb, which is just an absolutely awful thing. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's ridiculous and awful. But that was that phrase, rule of thumb. And so the idea of a girl being taken and beaten, that would be best case. That would be best case scenario. But then the idea of an honor killing, that is more than likely what would take place. And this is something that is going on still in today's world in other parts of the country. Not in parts of the country. Actually, it has happened in the United States, but other parts of the world, it's absolutely taking place. All right, so I am going to pause it here, and we will get to honor killings in the next video. So like I said, we'll get to that honor killings in the next one. I don't want to make these too long because I know that you guys got other stuff that you're dealing with. But just to give you an idea, so of what it is that, when we're reading Romeo and Juliet, there's this, why doesn't Juliet just do this? And why doesn't Juliet just do that? And it's not something that she could do. And this idea of, well, I would just, do this. Well, of course, in today's society, the girls have a lot more options and a lot more freedom. And the idea that, we can't take today's society and put it on Juliet, and we can't take today's society and put it on Romeo either, because there's things that he has to deal with that boys today just would not have to deal with. So we got to keep in mind the time period and the era and the social situation that these two kids, because that's really what they are. I mean, at the play, Juliet's 13, Romeo's 16. We got to keep in mind that these are kids dealing with a society that is vastly different than the society you're in. So anyway, I'm going to stop, and I will post this, and we'll get the next one coming up. We'll talk about honor killings, which is really kind of a drag. All right. See you next time.